So Nushad, I think that we'll wait maybe 2-3 more minutes. We'll start by 4:05, just in case that somebody else signs up. I see that we have 8 participants so far. But it's 4 o'clock on the dot, so we'll just wait a few minutes.
Yeah.
Sí, señora.
Ok, mi amor.
Okay, we're about to start. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It is a great pleasure to have you join our invitation to participate in the seminar calling Redistricting. My name is Eliana Montes. I'm the Deputy Director for IACO, which stands for Immigrant and American Citizenship Organization. We are a nonprofit organization located in the county of Passaic, and we have been serving the immigrant community for close to 30 years. One of our primary focus, besides giving immigration legal services to the community, is to educate the immigrant community so that they can partake activism within the community, and they can be more integrated into the American society. As we all know, New Jersey is among one of the most diverse states in the nation, and the immigrant community are an integral part of our economy and social fabric. New Jersey is home to approximately 2 million new Americans who make the states more vibrant and prosperous. And therefore, our neighbors, business owners, taxpayers, and workers, immigrants, we all make extensive contributions that benefit all us. We're going to be talking about the topic of redistricting. Redistricting is the process of drawing the lines of districts from which public officials are elected. When it's conducted fairly, it accurately reflects population changes and racial diversity, and it is used by legislators to equitable allocate representation in Congress. So this is a topic that is extremely important. Redistricting happens after every census, which happens every 10 years. And because of the diversity in New Jersey and the large population, there are a lot of new maps that are being drawn. And we have an expert who is going to be talking to us about how the lines are drawn and what are the effects, not only for the immigrant community, but for the population as a whole. So today I am honored to have with us Nushad Shadowski. Nushad is from Missouri originally. She is an attorney. She graduated in 2015 from Columbia Law School. Among the many important activities that she did at Columbia, she participated in the Human Rights Clinic, and she was also a teaching and writing fellow with the Columbia Foundation's Moot Court program. After law school, she did a fellowship at the Center for Appellate Litigation, where she was doing criminal appellate defense work. And she also has, it is very relevant because she also has a degree in political science and communications from the University of Missouri. After graduating from law school, she went to New York City, and she was a New York City counsel, where she was a legislative and committee counsel to the committees on aging, civil service and law, and veterans. And subsequently to that, she worked as a legal and legislative consultant on projects to reform elections administration in New York and to increase election security across the country. Today, she is an associate counsel with the Democracy and Justice Program at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. Nushad, thank you so much for being with us, and we're looking forward to hearing from you in this very important topic.
Thank you, Ileana, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. Makes me sound far cooler than I actually am. So let's see, I have a PowerPoint presentation to go along with my talk. Let me share my screen.
Sure.
And hopefully it will work. Okay, does that works, right?
We have it, yes, we can
Perfect.
see it, thank you.
Let's do this. Nope, that's not it at all. What happened here? Give me one moment.
Sure.
Nope, that is show slides. There we go. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
That should be fine. Okay, as Ileana mentioned, my name is Nuzhat Chowdhury. I'm a counsel with the Democracy and Justice Program at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. We do a lot of work with Black and Brown communities within New Jersey, along with immigrant communities of different diverse backgrounds, to do voting rights work. We do political participation work, and then we also have some pillars that do economic justice and criminal justice work as well. But redistricting and voting rights in New Jersey is what I do and what my pillar does, and so I'm extremely honored to be able to talk to you about this today. So as mentioned, we are going to be talking about redistricting and voting rights, and specifically how that impacts the immigrant community and how that impacts people of color in New Jersey in particular. It's a little bit cheesy to say, but our voice is power and your power matters. And that's why topics such as redistricting and voting rights is really important, particularly for communities of different racial and ethnic backgrounds. So Ileana went over some of this, but I think it's good to start with an overview of what is redistricting, because we hear a lot about redistricting on the news when it's happening. I know for many months last year, every time I turned on the news, someone was talking about maps. Someone was mad about maps, and then someone else was suing about maps. And I don't think it's intuitive what that means. So Redistricting is the process by which governments draw different political districts. It happens on all levels of government. So it happens in the US Congress, it happens for state, Senate, and assembly. It impacts school boards, it impacts your state courts and city councils. Where there are political maps that are drawn on the federal level, and there are political maps that are drawn on the state level, and all of them impact who it is that you vote for, who it is that you are allowed to vote for, and then who represents you in those different levels of government. It happens every 10 years after the census is taken. So it's really important to make sure that you fill out the census surveys that go around, because the census directly helps and impacts redistricting and all these maps that we're talking about today. In an ideal world, these maps would be drawn in an equal manner. So in an ideal world where everything is great, the census would show us where the communities in, say, New Jersey live, what those communities look like, what are their racial backgrounds, what are their ethnic backgrounds. And then those maps would be, those districts would be drawn so that the people from those backgrounds are represented equally and can choose candidates that look like them to represent them at the federal level, as well as the local and the state levels. So the purpose of redistricting, the end goal, is to create maps that have fair representation to every individual and every group within a particular area. That doesn't always happen, and in fact, it rarely happens, and we'll talk a little bit about why, but that's the goal of redistricting, and that's why it's so important. We just finished the latest cycle of redistricting. The new maps that are coming out, that have come out with the different congressional and the different state districts will begin this year. So when you next vote in November, you will be voting in your new districts. And these are the maps that are going to be the districts until 2030. And then in 2030, after the next census cycle, there will be another set of maps that are recreated, again, to reflect the different communities and how New Jersey has changed within these communities. So why is redistricting important? And as with most of these things, redistricting is important because it's about power. It plays a critical role in who runs for office, who's elected, and how they vote once they are actually in office. It's one of the most important factors in determining who represents you at these different levels of government and how they represent you. How a district is made up on the map, who is in that district, what it looks like, can really influence how elected officials respond to those communities and whether they represent those communities and respond to their needs at all. So when you think about redistricting going forward, that's what I want you to take away from this, that it is about power, and that's why it's so important. And that's why so many times politicians try to create these maps in a way that makes that is unfair. So as I sort of went over this already, it happens every 10 years, and the goal is to make sure that these voting maps reflect the communities that are within the state, and it reflects how they're changing, where they're going, what these communities look like. We want to make sure that the different districts aren't discriminating against any group, and that at the end of the day, the maps are made up so that the legislative body looks like the communities that they are coming from. It doesn't currently look like that, but that's why we have to continue fighting for maps that make sure that the legislative bodies and those lawmakers look like the communities that they are coming from. As with all things political, because redistricting is about power, you always have people who are trying to manipulate the process so that power goes one way instead of the other. So the way that redistricting works is that the Census Bureau will release a detailed report of the population and the demographic and where they all live. And then local governments and state governments will draw these new maps depending on that data. And so gerrymandering, which is something that I think we all hear about a lot on television, in the news, in the Supreme Court, Gerrymandering is when those district boundaries are drawn in order to influence who gets elected. So they are drawn in unfair ways so that one group has more power over another. At the end of the day, what gerrymandering does is it makes sure that politicians choose who their voters are instead of voters choosing who their politicians are. So it's deeply unfair, and it happens both ways, right? A lot of times I think we hear of gerrymandering being, one political party does gerrymandering, but that's not true. Both political parties take part in this process, and it is a fight over power. Very briefly, there are three sort of general types of gerrymandering that happens. One is racial gerrymandering, which means that they are drawing these different districts in a way that takes away voting powers from communities of color and prevents them from electing candidates of their choice. One example of sort of how they do this is, say that there is a community that has 70% Black population. What they can do is, instead of letting the Black population be in one district where they have the majority population so that they can elect candidates who look like them, in a gerrymandered map, oftentimes what happens is they will break that population into two different districts. So instead of having one district where the Black population can select their candidates because they have the majority population there, now they're in two different districts or three different districts where they don't have the majority population. So this is one of the ways in which racial gerrymandering happens. It happens in New Jersey, it happens everywhere. You take groups of these communities and you split them up so that their power is diluted. It's less than it would be if they had been put together in the district altogether. And then partisan gerrymandering is to draw the maps in a way that one political party has more power than another political party. Oftentimes, partisan gerrymandered maps will be very much challenged in courts. This happened in New York last year. Their maps were challenged because it was alleged that the Democrats had gerrymandered the map to benefit them and their seats. It happens all over the place, but it is about partisanship. And then bipartisan gerrymandering means to draw the maps in a way that protects incumbents or those who have already been elected to Congress, to their seat multiple times before. And that makes it different for new candidates to run and win against the incumbents. Gerrymandering is it's a real problem, and it has a real impact on the balance of power in Congress and in many state legislatures. Sometimes these maps are drawn in a way that even if one party has a really terrible election and they don't win that many seats, they might still have more seats in the legislative body because of the way the map is drawn. So it's when you hear about it, that's sort of the power and the politics that's going on behind the scenes. So what about New Jersey? New Jersey has two different commissions that they called on to draw our two different maps. So we have two different maps. One is the congressional map, which is the map of your congressional district. These are the politicians that are elected to represent you in Washington, D.C. New Jersey has 12 districts for the congressional district map. On the state level, we have 40 state districts, and these are the districts from which your state assembly member and your state senator are selected. There's a different commission that draws that map, and there's a different commission that draws the federal map. But those are the two different districts. You have 12 for congressional, and we have 40 for on the state level. The two commissions are, importantly, they're bipartisan, so they have an equal number of Democrats as there are Republicans. There's 13 members of the Congressional Commission, there's 11 members of the State Legislative Commission, and then there's one neutral party that a New Jersey court has picked in order to be a tiebreaker. Redistricting in New Jersey, as with many things, it's very political, it's very contentious. They spent many months on these maps and they were challenged, but we have the maps that we have going forward now. So just to give you sort of an idea of what these commissions look like, they took place over Zoom this last time because of the pandemic, but this was your Congressional Redistricting Commission. These were the 13 members who picked the congressional federal map and drew that. And then this is your State Legislative Apportionment Commission. So again, the 11 members who helped draw the map with the 40 different districts. The process of drawing these maps, so by law, they have to have, these different commissions have to have open meetings so that members of the public can come in and testify about their different communities and testify about the maps that have been proposed. So during this last cycle, there were hundreds of people who came out to testify to both commissions. We submitted over 50 different community of interest maps to show that there is a way to draw these maps in a way that is racially equitable, that makes sure that everyone's voice is heard equally within New Jersey. They took some of our suggestions, they rejected some. There's still a lot of work to be done going forward, but this is a way in which everyone can participate during the next cycle. When that next cycle happens, once again, the two different commissions will ask for people to come testify on different maps. So you, in individual capacity as community members, as different immigrant groups and organizations that you come from, you can participate in these redistricting commission hearings. And we very much urge you to do so that they know that your voice is important and that they need to draw these maps as racially equitable as possible. So what do the maps look like? First, we're going to talk about the congressional maps. So once again, these are the federal ones for that, from where you elect your senators and your representatives that go to Washington, D.C. On the left side, you'll see the different districts from 2011 to 2021. And then on the right side is the new, are the new maps, the new districts. Put on top of one another, these purple areas are all of the new districts, the new areas that have been redistricted going forward. So there's good news and there's some bad news with the maps. So we'll start with the good news. In terms of immigrant communities, in terms of communities of color, people of color now have greater influence in 4 additional districts compared to the previous map. So in the districts that are listed, now people of color have reached at least 35% of the population. And so they have more influence than they did before in the elections in those particular districts. 5 of the districts are majority people of color, which is the same as the old maps. But because New Jersey's population is so rapidly shifting, we anticipate that there are going to be a lot more districts that become majority people of color in the next 10 years. So that's really exciting. The not so good, despite New Jersey's very much booming Asian population, there are still no Asian influence districts, which is the same as the previous maps. And more concerningly, the new maps eliminate what used to be a Hispanic majority district. So there's still, I think, a lot of work left to be done to make sure that the maps represent us and these growing communities. So the new state legislative maps, we'll take a look at these next. On the left side, once again, this is what the previous map looked like with the 40 different districts. And on the right side is the new map with the new districts. All of those purple areas are in new districts. So there's been a lot of change. I will give you a website a little bit later, but definitely as we're going forward to the new season of elections, make sure to check what your district is, because you might be in the same district as you were previously, but you might be in a completely new one with new representatives to represent you and vote for. The good news for the new state legislative map is that 17 out of 40 districts are now majority people of color. That's up from 15 in the previous map. So we've gained 2 districts that are now majority people of color. One of the districts that used to be influence, which means that the people of color population was underneath the 50% threshold, has now become a majority district. So now they're over the 50% threshold, which is great. And people of color have greater influence in one additional district compared to the previous map. So again, it's a good thing when these districts show more diversity and then they become influential or majority people of color, because New Jersey is almost majority people of color, and we want that to be reflected in the different districts and who gets the power and where. The not so good news, there is not so good news. Again, there's so much room for improvement, but one of the majority Black districts and one of the Black plurality districts, it's still 1 and 1, which is the same as the previous map. Concerning because there is a large Black community within New Jersey. This doesn't accurately reflect that population. There are 2 majority Hispanic districts, 2 plurality. So there's been no change, no gain there. It's the same as the current map. As I mentioned before, there's no Asian influential district, despite the fact that that population has very much grown in New Jersey. And there is a district that looks like it was packed, which means that they opposite of sort of what I was saying earlier, they put all of the Black population into one district instead of making it so that they had one majority district and then one influential district. That's sort of technical in the weeds, but that's also it's not good. We want it to be more, we want the influence to be in multiple districts. There is a website in which you can go to find out your congressional and legislative district to make sure that you know if you have a new one or if it's the previous one. So if you go to fairdistrictsnj.org, all you have to do is put in your address and it will tell you what your new districts are and who your elected officials are for that district. Okay. Also, if there are questions as I'm going along, I know that this is a lot of information. Please feel free to ask the question in the little chat box, and I will do my best to answer any questions that are asked. But okay, so we've been talking a lot about redistricting and maps and all of this stuff. But what does that have to do with you as an individual? Why does it all matter? You'll be shocked to hear it's about power again, and it's about making your voice heard. Your local, state, and federal elected representatives, they make the decisions that impact our lives every single day. They're the ones who make they create economic opportunities within our communities. They vote on laws about healthcare, about immigration. They fund our schools and our roads and so much more. So whether you're able to vote for a candidate who looks like you and who best represents you and your community and your needs in the government, that's extremely important. Your vote is your voice in these things, and your voice deserves to be heard. Your community deserves to be heard. And that's why redistricting matters, and that's why voting matters. As we've said a couple of times already, New Jersey is one of the most diverse states in the country. We have almost majority people of color right now. I think where it's like around 45 to 48%. In the next 10 years, we will likely become majority people of color. So because we're majority people of color or on the threshold of that, our legislative body, our governments, they should look like us, they should represent us, they should represent our communities. But that's just not what it looks like right now. So on the state level, out of 120 state senators and members of the assembly in New Jersey, 70% of those legislators are white and non-Hispanic, and 2/3 are male. This is despite the fact that, as I mentioned, we are almost 50% majority people of color, and the population within New Jersey is also almost 50% female. So that is what our legislative body should look like. but it doesn't. It's 70% white and 2/3 are male. It's just not representative at all. Your vote is your voice in a democracy. And what that means is that you should be able to vote for people who look like you, and they should be able to go to Congress, go to your state and local governments and vote for your communities and represent your voice and your needs in things that actually very much matter. But I think it's very easy to say that your vote is power and you should go and vote, when the reality is that voting can be very difficult. There are a lot of barriers that make voting difficult, particularly among the immigrant community and among people of color. So there are a couple of ways in which we need to make voting easier. We need to make access to the vote easier for everybody within New Jersey and within the US in general. So we need more language accessibility. We need more interpreters at the polls. We need them for more languages. We need there to be ballots in more languages than we already have now. There needs to be more privacy at the polls so that people feel comfortable voting for the people that they want to vote for the ballot measures that they want to vote for. There needs to be more protection from discrimination so that people aren't getting turned away at the polls for their skin color or their ethnic background, their English proficiency, or what their sexuality is. There needs to be more legal protection to make sure that that isn't happening and everyone can go to the polls and vote. There's also a lot of places are not easy to physically access, particularly for those who are disabled or who are older, who need some ease of access, who need ramp access, or who cannot see the ballots that are given. There's a lot that we need to do in order to make sure that these different polling sites are accessible, and that people are able to go there and actually physically access the space. And finally, we need same-day voter registration in New Jersey. For those who might not know what that means, same-day voter registration is a tool. It's a pro-democracy tool. It's meant to allow people to vote easier. So in places that have same-day voter registration, you can go up to a polling location on the day of the election itself, even if you haven't registered before. And as long as you can show your identity, as long as you can establish that you have lived in that county for a certain number of days, you can register to vote at the polling location itself. Same-day voter registration is a great measure. It allows more eligible voters to vote. It helps increase voter turnout, especially among groups such as groups from the immigrant community or people who are from Black or brown backgrounds. It helps keep voter rolls more updated and correct. And it's safe and secure. Many other states already have same-day voter registration, and New Jersey should absolutely be one of them going forward. I will say, so these are sort of all of the ways that New Jersey needs to make voting easier. And there are groups such as the Institute that are working on different campaigns right now to make sure that these are brought to the forefront and that we are fighting for these things. So if you would like to get involved with any of these groups, one of the campaigns that are currently going on right now is a same-day voter registration campaign. There are bills that have been in the New Jersey legislature. We need to make sure, again, that our voices are heard, that legislators and our congresspeople know that this is what we want, that we want to pass those bills. There's also a New Jersey Voting Rights Act that has been introduced in the New Jersey legislature. A Voting Rights Act, it's like the federal one, but on the state level. And it's meant to protect voters. It's meant to protect them and expand protection against discrimination and to expand language accessibility, like we mentioned here. So same-day voter registration, New Jersey Voting Rights Act, two very big ongoing campaigns that are happening right now among the democracy community within New Jersey. Very exciting. If you want to get involved in anything like that, feel free to reach out to me and I can make that information available. And lastly, what I wanted to briefly touch on some some pro-democracy measures that New Jersey has already implemented. One of these ways is we've expanded the ways in which you can vote, which is very exciting. So now it's not just that you can go in person on election day. There are 5 ways in which you can vote in New Jersey. You can go in person at your voting place. You can go and do early voting at any of the early voting locations within New Jersey. You can also vote by mail. So you can apply to vote by mail and send it through the Postal Service. You can drop off your mail-in ballot at a ballot drop box, which are positioned all throughout different communities in New Jersey. Or you can take the vote by mail, your ballot, and you can drop it off at a county board of election. All of these ways are completely valid as long as you have registered to vote, and they're at your disposal. So you should absolutely feel free to use any of these ways the next time that voting comes around, for primaries as well as for general elections in November. If you have other questions about redistricting, about election and voting, here are some resources. The New Jersey State Elections website is actually fantastic. It has a ton of information. It'll have future election dates. It'll have registration deadlines. And then if you have any questions about voting, it will also have that. Remember to go and look up what your new districts are. If you do have new districts, fairdistrictsnj.org. And lastly, if you or anyone you know experience any sort of discrimination, any sort of harassment at a polling location, if your ballot is rejected for some reason and you're not told why, during primary and general election, during these election seasons, there is an election protection hotline. It's 866-OUR-VOTE. You can call it at any time and someone will help resolve whatever issue it is that you're having. But that's sort of all I had to say. So I'm happy to take any questions if there are any questions, and otherwise I'll turn it back over to Ileana.
Thank you so much, Nushat. The information is extremely valuable and is very important for the community to understand all these concepts about being involved in the census, participating in the census, and understanding the redistricting and the impact that it has on our communities. I'm going to open it to questions to the audience, but I do have some questions in the meantime. The people are ready to start asking questions. And the first question is, can you briefly tell the immigrant community if there are any safe valves about participating in the census? I know that is one of the concerns specifically for the undocumented individuals about, giving information and their nationality and all of that. So if you can just expand a little bit on that, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely. So I think that anxiety comes from what happened during the previous administration. During the Trump administration, the US Census Bureau was considering putting a question on the census that asks for your nationality or your citizenship. That is not allowed. The courts stopped that particular question from being put newly on the census. The census has not asked any questions about nationality or citizenship in over 50 years. And they're now taking feedback from a lot of different advocates about what sorts of questions, how to improve the process for 2030. A lot of different groups have said, do not put any sort of citizenship or nationality question on it. Other than during the Trump administration, like I said, that has not been allowed for 50 years. So I think you should be comforted knowing that it's very unlikely that they will bring back that question. It will not be allowed.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions? If you do, please feel free to raise your hand and I will give you the turn to ask the question. But I do have a few more questions, Nushat. You did show us the redistricting commissions and what they look like, both in the federal and the state level. And while there is an opportunity for the public to make comments, and obviously, we know that New Jersey is one of the most diverse states, the public obviously could make comments. However, my concern is the lack of diversity within the actual committee or committees, the two committees. So has the state of New Jersey has done anything to kind of like improve who is making the final decision?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So these commissions are picked by they're picked by the political parties themselves. So as you can see here, there are 6 picked by Democrats, 6 picked by GOP, 5 and 5 on the other side. Unfortunately, because they are picked by the parties, there's little, I think, conversation that's been made in terms of making the commissions more diverse. But I think that's something that's feedback that needs to be given next time for the process. You should be talking to, if you are a member of these different political parties, you should absolutely be telling your Democratic leaders or your Republican leaders that is something that we need in the commission next time, is more diversity, so that they are making the maps the way that need to be reflected in our communities.
Thank you. And you mentioned about gerrymandering, which is obviously a system that is manipulated to accommodate one party or the other, either the incumbent, or to prevent other people from running and actually representing. What is the actual process to challenge those gerrymandering maps?
Yeah, so the way that these maps are challenged it's through the court system. Sometimes the maps are challenged by the other political party or representatives of that political party. If they think, for example, if the Republican Party thinks that the Democrats have gerrymandered the map, they can challenge it in court. But advocates can also challenge these different maps in courts, advocates and different members of the community. This is why the state VRA is so important, because who gets to challenge these gerrymandered and unfair maps really depends on the Federal Voting Rights Act. The Federal Voting Rights Act tells you who has what sort of power, what violates the voting rights protections in that act. Over the past many years, the Supreme Court has made the federal VRA much weaker than what it used to be. So what that means is that it's actually much more difficult now to bring these lawsuits in court to prove that a map is racially biased, right? It's very difficult to do so now compared to what it used to be. And that's bad, because everyone who is impacted by these maps should be able to bring a lawsuit and say that, hey, no, these maps are not representative of our different communities. But under something like the New Jersey Voting Rights Act, that would give us additional protections. So even if the Federal Voting Rights Act says that you need to do these 10 different steps to prove that a map is racially bad, the New Jersey, the State Voting Rights Act might say that you don't need to prove those 10 things. Under state law, you only need to prove these 3 things. And so then it will be easier for civil rights advocates and our community members to sue on those maps. So I know that, go ahead.
I'm sorry, so how long is the process? Is it very lengthy? Because I know that obviously in the court system, everything takes very much time. So it's a two-point question. Number one, more or less, how long is the process? And number two, what happens to the legislative district while it's being challenged in court?
Right. So when a map is challenged, that map is sort of put on pause until the courts can decide whether or not it is actually violating any sort of federal or state law, right? And so usually I would say the court cases that have been brought in New York and in New Jersey for the previous maps, they have been resolved in a matter of months or within a year. So it's not like a years and years long process, because there's a timeline on it. They need to approve a map so that we can go forward with our districting.
So for the most
Yeah.
part, by the time the election comes, that issue has been resolved.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And what happens is that a court will, so let's say that our groups bring a lawsuit and say that New Jersey, your map is racially discriminatory against the Black population here. The court will then put whatever map that the commission has created on hold. They will look at it, they will look at all of the evidence, and then they will either say, no, that map is fine, and then that map will proceed, that will become the new map, or they will say, no, this map is discriminatory, we need a new one. So then they will tell the commission, you need to make a new map now. And that's what happened in New York last year. They had to redraw all of the maps because the court found that it had been gerrymandered.
In New Jersey, have we had always the 40 legislative districts, or is that subject to change depending on the population?
It's subject to change depending on the population. Yeah, so it really depends on how many people New Jersey has and where they are moving.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions? I do want to ask you if you can just clarify a little bit between the majority versus the plurality districts so that we can understand a little bit the distinctions between the two of them.
Yeah, of course, it's very unclear when you don't already know it. So a majority district is if a population has more than 50%. So if the South Asian population in a particular district is above 50%, if it's at 57, if it's at 60, that's considered a majority district. That means that there are more people in that district that are South Asian than aren't, and so they have much more influence there. The plurality district is 35%. So that means that they have that whatever population reaches that 35%, they have influence, but it's not 50% yet. They're not the majority yet. And so that's sort of how the two different types are divided.
Oh. And in one of your slides, you showed that there are two populations, two minority populations, the African American, I believe it, and the Hispanics that have those two representations. Has there been any other breaking down among other ethnicities or just the two?
I think those are the two that have been tracked. Other than they've tracked the Asian population and found that there's no plurality or influential Asian district right now. And there is a question about the Arab population and what that means for New Jersey. That's a bigger issue, and mostly it comes from the fact that the census does not ask the Arab population to identify as the Arab population. It's a census question. So to answer your question, the Black and the Hispanic population is sort of what we have better data for. The Arab population, we don't really have very good data for. And then the Asian population, we just know there have been no districts yet that have been made that way.
Yeah, interesting, because while it is so important to know, the kind of background that there are in each district for budget issues and for appropriations, it is not right to ask all those questions in the census. So it's a balancing test. So how do they come up with the statistics to make a determination that a district is Hispanic or a Black district?
It's all based on the census data. So based on the census data, they will see where the populations sit within the state, and then they will draw the different districts and maps on top of that. And so you can see based on the census data, like where those populations are according to where the different lines are drawn. So which again makes the census so important, because you want to make sure that you are heard and counted so that we know where your voice is and where in the community you are living.
Perfect. Well, I think that this has been extremely helpful.
I think, sorry, Ileana, I think I see one question in the chat that I wanted to answer.
Okay, yes.
So I think Adriana asked, does the same day vote registration, is it currently in effect or is it still a proposition? So New Jersey does not have same day voter registration yet. It's still a proposition. So we want to make sure that our politicians and our legislators know that we want to get it passed here, but it is an active campaign among the advocate community. It's a bill that's been introduced, but we don't have it yet, but we're working on it.
And I think what has become very popular in New Jersey in the last couple of years is the vote by mail.
Yes, yep, absolutely. So, and like I mentioned at the end of the presentation, there are multiple ways in which you can do vote by mail. They're all very safe. You should absolutely feel free to use any of them, but make sure you apply. There's an application period before the actual deadline. Since we don't have same day voter registration, just make sure you apply to get the ballot by mail and then you can vote by mail.
And is that registration something that you do only once, or you have to register every time that there is an election?
So voter registration, you only have to do one time unless there's like some sort of a voter purge. So you only have to do it one time. You can do it at the DMV. We have online voter registration now, so you can do it online. But for voting by mail, every time you wish to vote by mail, you do have to apply, or you have to ask the County Board of Election to send you that ballot. So that piece you do have to ask every time, but registration in general, you only have to do it once. Unless, sorry, one caveat is unless you move to a different county. If you move from one county to another, you do have to register in your new county.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, I think that we have come to the end of the presentation. Thank you so much. I want to take this opportunity to thank the audience also for participating. And, you know, IACO participates in a lot of educational seminars throughout the year. So we will keep you all posted about the future sessions that we will have. And we look forward to continuing working with you, Nushad, and the commission and the social justice. Okay, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.